Hello, today we are assembling a vertical wall bed, and we're going to start with assembling the cabinet. And when we do that, we start putting these red screws in all the holes on both sides of the cabinet. So what we just simply do, there is already pre-drilled holes for them. So we just screw one in each and every hole, very simple. And you can, when you do this, fasten the Rustex screws into the side of the wall bed. You can use a screwdriver, no problem. But for some reasons you cannot use a screwdriver for all of these things, and I will tell you more about it. So now, as you see, I've already done one side where I have fastened these into the holes. So just simply like that, put them into the rest of the hole. And yes, this part can be a little bit tricky to get all the holes in at the same time, so take them piece by piece a little bit before you just jam them all in. You make sure that you do find all the holes perfectly fine before you do slam them in. And if you're doing this alone, actually to have a wall, or in this case as we have a sofa here, is very good, because now when you start beating these in, they won't come out on the other side, because that's what they will do if you have nothing there. So now they are actually all in. So make sure that they are tightened there. So that's all we can do for there. And now it's only some of these screws that you can actually up. As you see, there is actually some more screws that we can tighten on the very top part here. So just tighten the Rustex screws first, just as on the other side, because this thing will make the whole cabinet so much more stable, because it's still quite wobbly when you start lifting it up. And as you see here now, I've put in a chopping board underneath. You can put whatever, just to be able to get to these screws here, because this is a small thing that you can actually fasten before you go on to the other side. The wooden screws that you have here on this, you have small holes here on the very top. So you put those wooden screws in there, and also here on the side you have these plastic angles, and the same thing there, you put the short wooden screws in there. So make sure that you don't use the long ones there, but you put the short wooden screws in there before you lift it up. Okay. So now we have fastened all the screws that we can fasten so far. So now what we need to do is lift the whole wall bed up. And be careful, because as you can see, it's still loose parts here, because you have not been able to fasten them properly when you have the wall bed laying on the back. but we can actually fasten them quite easy now when you've lifted the wall bed up. So now you see it from the back. So what we do here, just fasten all the screws like this. Now all the rustic screws are properly fastened, and now there is 4 small wooden screws, as you see here, that is here on the plastic angles that we need to fasten also when we have it in place, because that really helps to stabilize the whole cabinet very much. So it's a quite important thing that you do fasten these when you have it here. And one thing that is really worth mentioning while we're at it is actually, you see the arms that we have on the front, the arms for the mechanism. Make sure that they are folded out when you do start the assembly, otherwise you have to restart everything when you're going to put the front of the wall bed on. But as you see, it's a very simple thing to do the cabinet, because the cabinet is actually almost done now. So what we have to do when we have done the assembly of the whole cabinet is the front of the wall bed. So that will be the next thing. So now for assembling the front piece. Now 2 important things to start with. It's actually more important when you do the front than when you do the cabinet, but it's important also, whatever you assemble, always put something on the floor so that you don't get any marks on the front, and always check the very front piece on both sides before you put it on the floor, so you have one good side that you are sure it looks good on the outside, so there's no marks on it. And when you have that done, then it's time to do the metal frame. And the metal frame is very simple. You screw it together here with metal angles in the corners. And as always, whenever you assemble anything, always fasten the 4 corners, all the screws first, before you fasten them completely. Don't screw them tight, just fasten them. Don't screw them tight before you have fastened all the 4 corners. Otherwise, it will be so more difficult for you to make this right. So now it's time for a very boring thing to do, because now we need to fasten every single one of these small screws, as you see here in all the holes in the metal frame, on the front of the wall bed. And now it's very important that you do put the metal frame correct on the front panel. So, as you see, this is what's going to be up in the end of the when the front is finished. And as you can see now, the sides are made equal, so actually you can't fail on this one. The hole looks the same on the upside and on the downside, so that's done, so you won't be able to make a mistake in this case. So just assemble the frame, and you put it, and you see you need to have a gap here up on this end that's going to be up when the front is finished, and on each side you need an equal gap on both sides, like that. And on the side that's going to be down is going to be level with the front panel, so there's nothing sticking out whatsoever. And very, very, very important thing always when you do assemble these sorts of things, do start with the 4 corners, 1 screw in each corner before you fasten the rest of the corners. As you will see yourself, it moves very, very easily, and it's very important that this is laying where it should be on the front panel. Otherwise it will not look good when you put it on the wall bed. And also very important, when you do fasten these screws into the holes, use a long extension on your screwdriver like this one, because if you don't, you will actually be able to bend the metal as you go along the metal frame, and you really don't want to do that. So use an extension on your screwdriver so that you do not bend the metal frame. So now it's time to fasten the wall bed to the wall, and as you see here on the side, both of the mechanism arms are out, and that's important that you have them out so that they are not behind, because otherwise it's impossible to get the front on afterwards. And now we have the ladder ready. So now we're on the top of the wall bed, and as you see here, we have no top piece of the wall, but that's coming later. So that's the whole reason why this hole is up here, so you do not see when you fasten the wall bed into the wall. So that's the whole thing of it. So as you see here, we have the metal angles that we have fastened in already into the wall bed with these short wooden screws. And as you see here also, it's not much space left up to the roof, so it's actually, if you have little space, do fasten them before you turn the wall bed up and pull it towards the wall. So, and then just fasten with the wooden screw like that. Wooden screw. Now we have, actually, because here we do have a wooden wall, and that's of course the absolutely easiest wall to tighten it to. And make sure that this here bracket sits right, because it needs to be shaped in the same angle as the stripe. Otherwise it won't sit there so good. And when you have done that, you can put this white plastic cover on. But actually it's not so important with the cover in this case, because like I said, you will have a top piece on top of this one later on. And of course, if you have a stone wall or a concrete wall or whatever, then you have to make sure that you do fasten it carefully. But if you have a wooden wall like this one, this is absolutely the easiest way to fasten this. And this is now a small 90 vertical wall bed, so I think I would say that it's enough with 2 metal angles to fasten it with up in the top part. And we will come later on, and there's also one important thing why we use this one with a big hole in it, because it's not at this point. You do make sure that the wall bed is straightened and that the front is angled with the wall bed. You do that when you have fastened the front to the cabinet. So that's why you need these 2 big holes, so you can actually loosen them if necessary and shove the whole thing back and forth a little bit. Oh, now it's time to fasten the springs into the mechanism of the wall bed. Just spread them evenly out like this, and the amount of springs that you put in depends on the weight of the mattress you put into the wall bed. And this can actually be important that you do calculate this a little bit before you start, because if you ever want to change this afterwards, you have to lift off the front of the wall bed every single time, so it's not so very easy to take out or put in more springs into the wall bed, so think about it. Now we have a 90 vertical wall bed here, and I would say somewhere between 3 and 4 springs is enough. In this case I choose 4 springs because we have a quite heavy mattress that we're going to put in, a latex mattress, and a latex mattress, there's quite a lot of weight, so I would say 4 springs is good enough. And always start to put the spring on this side first, and when you do put the other side, make sure that you have the arm in as long as possible, so you have as short distance as possible to have no tension on them, and then just put them on. But do a few calculations and see how many springs you need, because I would say for a 91 maximum 4 is fine. If you have a 120, 140, you can put 5 or 6. And the only time that I think you need to use all the springs into the mechanism on both sides, if you have a, for example, 180 times 200 bed in the vertical wall bed, then you need all the springs. Otherwise, mostly you don't need to put all of them in there. So now it's time to start to lift on the front of the wall bed. We have all the springs into the mechanism, and as you see here, when you pull out the arm, you have a safety spring here that you have to have in place on both sides, so you put it on the knot like that, and that's very, very important that it's on, otherwise it's not possible to have the arm out. So you have to pull really strong, and be careful about your fingers there, because it's quite tricky to get that out, and don't get your fingers in between. And when you have both the arms out, you need to do another thing, and that is put one bolt and nut on each side of the metal frame in the front piece, like this, and only on the round hole, in the top round hole, not in the second hole, only in the top round hole, and then I show you why. So now it's time to lift the actual front piece onto the mechanism and arms. So you have the 2 bolts in there, so you start, and now I feel quite comfortably to do this myself, but of course it's so much easier if there is 2 of you. So you just lift it on to especially if the first time you do something like this, then of course it will be so much easier for you if you're 2 persons, but I feel quite comfortable doing this myself. But another thing that is very important that you do, that I prepared before I did this, that I have the second bolt and nut ready, because you cannot leave this now, because if you leave the front now, you will not be able to go and collect your screw somewhere else. You need this so you can put the second screw into the second hole. So, and of course you can always make adjustments afterwards, that's no problem. No problem at all, but you need to have the second screw prepared for this. So now that is tightened on that side, and we do the same thing on the other side. And of course, when you put the bolt in, also use a bracket in between, especially on the outside. So now I show you why you need to fasten all the 4 bolts before you do loosen the, because as you see here, now when we loosen you have the safety springs falling off like that, and then you close the whole front like that. And now it's time to make some adjustments. And as you see here, this actually looks quite terrible. And that's exactly why I told you before, when you do fasten it to the wall, that's why it's so important that you have this big round hole. So you can just loosen it a little bit up there and then just straighten the whole cabinet up a little bit so it looks good with the front. Oh, now we have straightened the front up. As you can see, the gap is quite evenly all the way, and it was actually leaning all the way towards the white cupboard before, so, and it's not. So what you really need to do is just straighten up the cupboard, and then you fasten the metal angles on top again. And now it's time for the last piece of the puzzle of the actual wall bed. It's the very top piece, and as you see here, you have plastic angles which I have screwed on both sides, with a little gap in between, just a few centimeters, just as wide as the side of the wall bed here. It needs to be the same length. So now we have come to the point where it's time to put the slats into the bottom of the wall bed. And the reason why we do put these slats into the bottom of the wall bed all the way like this is because they are taking the weight off, so you don't put all the weight on the front, because the only thing that will happen then is that when you put your weight on the mattress, then the front will pop out. And as you see here, both here in the top and here in the bottom where you have your feet, we have left a space left. So you spread the wooden slats evenly throughout here, and then just fasten them with a wooden screw. And I want to give you a little tip when you do fasten the wooden screw before I fasten the last one here. As you see, it's just slightly a little bit longer than the wooden slat is broad, and that's actually the way it should be. Make sure that you don't use a screw that is too long, because then it will go all the way through, and you don't want that to happen, because then you will see it on the other side of the front, of course. So always measure the screw that it's the right length before you screw it in. Now for the last piece of the puzzle. As you see, we have the fiber textile really folded nicely here, and now we have one spanner already fastened in one end, and now we're going to fasten this metal spanner in the textile. So important thing here, you use the same small screws as you did when you fastened the metal frame on the front before, so you have to use, of course, every single hole again. But what's really important here when you do this is that you really pull the textile as hard as you can, so you really get it tightened, because that's the only way that you will not feel the wooden slats underneath afterwards. So if you do a sloppy job here, you will actually start feeling the wooden slats underneath the textile. So there we go. Oh, now it's really tight, and so now all you have to do is fasten a screw in every single one of these holes, and you have a tightened fiber textile over all the wooden slats. Now for the very last piece of the puzzle, the belts to fasten the bed linens when you close the front of the wall bed, so that they still there when you open it again. Now just fasten it with one simple wooden screw like that. Actually, as you see, I would have been needing 2 hands. But that's it. Now you fasten one in the foot end and one up here in the top. So that's all you need. And I want to show you one last little thing, because now I said we were finished, and we are finished if you want to be finished, because this depends on who you are and what you want, because the wall beds always comes with handles. If you want to fasten handles on the wall bed, you can do that wherever you want. You drill the holes on the front wherever you want them, but 99% of my Swedish customers here in Sweden do choose not to fasten these handles, because you can open the wall bed anyway. But of course the wall bed here is about 220 centimeters high, so you need to stretch a little bit to be able to pull down the front of the wall bed. So if you can reach, you don't need the handles. But if you want to put the handles on, of course you can do that. And there is no pre-drilled hole, so you put them wherever you want. Thank you.